So I've been putting off this video because I know it's going to be a hard one and I don't want to bawl my eyes out on camera. But Basil has passed away and it wasn't of natural causes. It was actually very sudden and very traumatic. And what had happened was on Imbolc, I had left to pick up the kids from school, and on that particular day I brought the dogs along with me, which I do sometimes so they can get out and get a car ride. They really like that. And when I got home, I noticed that Basil's cage door was open. So me and my eldest son were looking around the house for Basil, trying to figure out where he was. And my other son had found Basil in my office underneath a cart on the floor. And my senior cat, Mo, was there beside the cart. And Beltane was nowhere to be found. We proceeded to get Basil. He was still alive at that point. But I think he had given up at that point. He was exhausted. His back tail feathers were, it kind of looked like he had been attacked on his back tail feathers, and on one of his legs he was limping. So I was just able to essentially just scoop him up like this. And, you know, he wasn't startled, didn't fly, didn't do anything, just allowed me to scoop him up, and I carried him back down to his cage. So what we think happened is, because we have the certain cages that prevent birds from opening them up from the inside, because Violet is known as an escape artist. So I purposely bought cages that prevent that from happening. So what we think happened was Beltane had a habit of jumping on the front of the cages, and I think by her doing that, it had opened the door. And unfortunately, it was the bottom door where she could have, you know, reached in there and grabbed Basil and attacked him. And since Mo was up there, who knows, Mo could have been attacking Basil as well. And Mo is a very big, heavy cat. So I think between the two of them, you know, they did something within that hour that I was gone. And I'm assuming that not only was Basil limping and his tail feathers were all messed up, but he also probably had some internal bleeding. Because that night, we actually thought he was going to be okay, that, you know, he was just still in shock, still startled, even though he was limping a little bit, and his tail feathers were all ruffled. He was still able to climb the sides of his cage like he normally did with his beak and his claws. And even at one point, he, you know, flapped up to one of the higher tiers as well and was looking in his mirror. However, he wasn't singing at all. And with male parakeets, they sing a lot, whereas the female parakeets don't sing as, you know, don't sing as much. So I wanted to, you know, keep an eye on him. And if he didn't get any better, my plan was to take him to the exotic pet vet that we have in Fort Wayne. However, I woke up the next morning and it was quiet. There was no singing like there normally was, and I knew something was wrong. So I go out to the cage, and he's still alive at this point, but he's at the bottom of the cage in the corner. His breathing is labored, and he's not standing. He's, actually laying down. And I proceeded to put some water and some food at the bottom of the cage because I wanted to make sure that he was still getting food and water even if he couldn't fly to the top. However, when he stood, he would take a step or two and then face plant. And it wasn't much longer that I watched him take his last breath. I sat next to the cage and cried my eyes out and just watched as he took his last breath because there was nothing I could do. And I knew that if he had internal bleeding, even taking him to the vet, they wouldn't have been able to do anything either. And at that point, I knew that something internally was wrong. And he was gone. Violet, I could tell Violet knew that something was up. She, kept looking into his cage, and he would always be singing to the point where it kind of felt like it annoyed Violet because he was just singing so much. He was such a happy bird. And it's so unfortunate because he was younger than Violet, and he was such a happy bird, and he just didn't deserve that. And my husband and I, we've been crying, of course, since it happened, and we hold so much guilt because I think, well, why was I stupid enough to adopt Beltane when I had already adopted 2 parakeets? Or, was there something I could have done to prevent Beltane from jumping up there? Now, we did have water in a squirt bottle and would squirt her anytime that she was over in that area or tried to jump up there. And while we were home, obviously, we prevented anything bad from happening. But it still happened, and I don't know. I have so much guilt because he was such a happy bird, and just with those small animals, like, I'm the human. I'm supposed to be the one protecting them, and I didn't do it. And I know I wasn't there, I wasn't able to do it, but I just feel like there was something I could have done to prevent that. And I have such a strong connection to birds. My nickname is Birdie, and I'm not sure if I've ever shared this on my channel before, but I got that nickname when I was a baby because my first word was bird, because I was always so fascinated with the birds outside, and we had a pet bird that I actually named Bird when I was younger. So I don't know, I've just always had a strong connection with birds, so this really hit me hard. And I had just lost my 2 mice, Remy and Emil, at the end of last year, so I was already dealing with that loss. But with them, I knew that they wouldn't live very long because they were actually bred as feeder mice, and the pet store had warned me, they're not going to live very long. They're probably going to have deformities and autoimmune diseases, which both of them ended up having autoimmune diseases and, died within, I think it was a month of each other. So I kind of expected that one. But this one, I didn't expect it. He was a young bird, and he was just so happy. And like I said, he didn't deserve it. So my husband and I were trying to figure out something to do to commemorate him by. And on my channel before, I've done different things with even birds that who have died out in nature. Like there were birds that had flown into the window at my old witch's cottage, and there was one where I buried it in the ground, and I had a whole burial ceremony for it. And then there was another one where I commemorated it by allowing it to do a natural decomposition and then turning its bones into beautiful art. So I wanted to do something similar with Basil. However, since it's wintertime and the new witch's cottage has a lot of neighborhood cats, I couldn't just allow him to naturally decompose outside, so I could do something with his bones. So I had to think of something else, and I didn't want to bury him because who knows if if we ever move again. I wanted him, I wanted to be able to bring him along with us if we ever move. So my husband actually came up with a beautiful idea, which was to purchase a planter and a plant and bury Basil within the, underneath the plant in the pot, and put it next to Violet. And then when Violet passes, we could do the same with her in another plant. And I just loved that idea. So the next footage, you will see a deceased Basil. It's not gruesome. There's no blood or anything, but I do want to put a warning out in case, you're uncomfortable with deceased animals. You will see Basil deceased as I place him in this beautiful pot and plant. And I actually got this shelf that I hung from the ceiling above Violet's cage, and it just turned out to be a beautiful memorial, and I wanted to share that with all of you. But some of you might be thinking, why the heck are you putting yourself through this and filming it? But I wanted to commemorate him. I wanted this video for future reference and just, as a memorial to him. So, in the meantime, I'll show this footage, but I also wanted to ask all of you, if you have birds and cats, how do you prevent your cats from jumping up on the cages, and how do you keep the birds safe? Because at this point, I want to make sure, I want to take even more precaution with Violet because I don't want the same thing to happen to her. So if you have any ideas, please let me know down in the comments. Now, I've thought about, separating them, but I don't want Violet to be isolated because birds can get very depressed because they are very social. So I want to be able to leave her out, in the living room, and it's not fair to Beltane to be locked up either. And I have to say, I can't be mad at Beltane. Yes, I'm upset, and I did put her in her cat room for the majority of the day that it happened because it was just too hard to look at her since she did kill Basil. But I can't be mad at her because it's she's a kitten. She's still under 1 year old, and it's just her instinct. Cats love birds, chasing birds. That's just their thing. So I can't be mad at her, but it's still very hard to deal with. But yeah, if you have any ideas other than separating them, please let me know. I still, I want both animals to still be happy and thrive in their environment without the fear of this happening to Violet as well. So, I'm sorry I'm crying on camera. I'm sorry this is a sad video. I try really hard to bring uplifting and happy videos to my channel because I know life in general is hard and I don't want to bring more negativity to anybody else because I know others are going through, what have you as well. So I don't normally want to bring extra negativity to people's life, but I appreciate all the love and understanding, and I hope you find this next segment as beautiful as I did. Should I wrap them in something? Tissue paper or just put them in?